In 2005. In a small, peaceful town in Indiana, USA, a tragic story took place, shaking the local community. Pastor Mark Harrison's family, considered a model of morality and altruism, suddenly became the focus of a mysterious investigation when his daughter, Lisa Harrison, 17, suddenly disappeared. People began to ask many questions, but behind the curtain of respect and the perfect appearance of this family, a dark truth gradually emerged, causing great shock. Mark Harrison, a 45-year-old pastor, is a figure of faith and spiritual guidance in his small town. Mark appears to be a righteous man, with high morals, and devoted to his church and his parishioners. He regularly preaches about mercy, forgiveness, and the importance of family. His words are respected by many, and Mark's position in the community is increasingly solidified. However, behind that standard appearance, Mark hides a completely different person, a dark and frightening person in his family, especially to his own daughter, 17-year-old Lisa Harrison. Mark is no longer the respected pastor that everyone sees. Instead, he became an abuser, a father who was condemned for his violent and toxic actions. During the day, he was a strict father but still appeared kind to the neighbors. However, when night fell, Mark became a completely different person, using power and control to impose on his family, especially his daughter. The abuse did not stop at physical actions but also deeply hurt the spirit. Mark used words to control, making his daughter feel worthless and trapped in an invisible trap of fear and pain. She was not only afraid of her father but also afraid of what would happen if the truth about Mark was revealed, repressed and manipulated for years. Mark's daughter lived in anxiety, not daring to tell anyone for fear of not being believed, especially in the eyes of respect that the community had for her father. While outside society views Mark as a shining example of morality, with almost absolute reverence, his family must endure his dark side. Mark used the respect of others as a weapon to protect himself from suspicion. And this made him even more dangerous. He knew that in the eyes of others he was a good person, a respectable pastor, and therefore any accusations against him would be considered untrustworthy. This only added to the despair and isolation his daughter experienced. Furthermore, Mark also knew how to cover up the truth with superficial actions such as giving gifts or showing affection to his daughter in front of others, creating a perfect screen to hide his true nature. These actions not only increased the victim's feelings of confusion and helplessness, but also made it so that people around him never had a reason to suspect Mark. People often praised him as a model father, making it even more difficult for the truth to be revealed. In addition, Mark and Lisa lived in a small house with Lisa's mother, Sarah Harrison, a gentle and patient woman. Sarah often had to travel far due to the nature of her job, leaving Lisa and Mark alone at home for periods of time. It was during Sarah's absence that Mark took advantage of his mother's lack of protection to commit despicable and brutal acts against his daughter. Under the guise of a respected and honorable father in the community, no one could suspect that he was the one abusing his daughter right in their own home. Lisa, despite being a strong and intelligent girl, became a victim of the very father she once trusted. At first, fear, shame, and a sense of being completely controlled kept her from telling anyone what had happened. She lived in painful silence, afraid that if she spoke out, no one would believe her, and that her father would punish her even more severely. The mental violence Mark inflicted on Lisa made her feel trapped in a vicious cycle with no way out. The nights when Sarah was away became a never-ending nightmare for Lisa. Mark would sneak into her room, using every means to suppress and humiliate her. In those moments, Lisa felt completely alone, with no one to call for help. Each time, Mark would threaten that if Lisa dared to tell the truth, not only would he ruin her life, but he would also destroy their family. Guilt and fear kept Lisa silent. However, a person's suffering cannot last forever. One night, while Sarah was away on a business trip, Mark entered Lisa's room again. She was exhausted from years of abuse by her father. In that moment, Something inside Lisa broke out. She was no longer the girl who was controlled and threatened. The resentment, anger, and pain that had been pent up for so long exploded into a violent rage. She screamed, threatened to tell her mother everything, and even announced that she would report the incident to the police. Lisa's threat sent Mark into a state of chaos and panic that he had never experienced before. For Mark, nothing was more terrifying than having his hideous secret exposed to the light. He feared not only losing his prestigious position in the community, but also losing everything he had built: his family, his reputation, and his power. In Mark's eyes, being discovered was not only a personal downfall, but also a complete breakdown of his life. Threatened by Lisa's resistance, Mark felt cornered. Fear and anxiety gradually turned to anger and madness. In a panic, Mark began to imagine the possibility of being exposed in public, being exposed as an abuser and losing everything. That was unacceptable to him. Mark, in his twisted mind, made a terrible decision. He had to silence Lisa forever to protect his secret. There was no other way in his mind at that time. That fateful night in August 2005. The atmosphere in the Harrison family home became extremely tense when Mark and his daughter Lisa had a fierce confrontation. Lisa, after years of abuse and control by her father, decided to tell the truth. She is no longer afraid and wants to end all of Mark's brutal actions, even if it may lead to serious consequences. Mark, in a panic, could not accept that his daughter would expose all his crimes. He knew that if Lisa revealed what had happened, not only would his reputation and status in the community be ruined, but his family life would be completely destroyed. Lisa's firm declaration that she would expose all of Mark's atrocities caused him to explode in anger. He no longer had the calmness to think about the consequences of his actions. In a moment of hysteria, Mark rushed at Lisa, using his hands to strangle her neck. Lisa struggled, trying to escape, but his strength was too great. Her rapid breathing gradually died away, and then her body stopped, no longer moving. Lisa's eyes widened in panic and horror, but it was all over. When he realized that he had killed his daughter, Mark stood still for a moment, not believing what had just happened. He felt dizzy, not because of loss or regret, but because of fear. The fear of being discovered and punished began to fill his mind. In that moment, instead of admitting his guilt, Mark decided to hide this matter at all costs. He had to get rid of Lisa's body, had to create another story to cover up the truth. After regaining his composure, Mark dragged Lisa's body from the bedroom to the back of the house. The weight of the corpse did not stop him, but only made him more determined to hide his crime. After leaving the house, he headed towards the small forest near the house, where a few people passed by, and it was unlikely to be discovered. It was the perfect place for him to hide Lisa's body without anyone suspecting. In the quiet of the night, Mark continued his barbaric work. He dug a shallow hole, just enough to hide Lisa's body, and covered it with a layer of dirt and leaves to cover up any traces. Under the ground, Lisa, a young, intelligent, and full of potential girl, now lies forever murdered by the father she once loved. After burying the body, Mark wiped his sweat and sat down to catch his breath. He knew that hiding the body was not the hardest part. He also had to make up a perfect story to avoid any suspicion from the community and the police. When he returned home, Mark prepared the next step in his plan. He carefully called the police, pretending to be panicked and worried. During the call, he reported that Lisa was missing. He confirmed that his daughter had gone out for a walk around the area near their house, as she usually did every evening, but this time she did not return. His voice was trembling, full of worry and anxiety, as if he was truly a father worried about his daughter's safety. The police listened and immediately dispatched forces to the scene. When the police arrived at the house, Mark continued to play the role of a grieving and panicking father. He led the police to the area where he said Lisa often walked. He detailed that she had left home around 8 p.m. But when several hours had passed without her returning, he became concerned and began looking for her. When he found no trace of his daughter, he decided to call the police. Mark's story was convincing. He knew how to use language and gestures to build trust. As a respected pastor in the community, no one suspected him. Lisa's disappearance quickly attracted the attention of the entire community. The local press picked up the story, and the entire town began to join in the search, hoping to find the missing girl. Volunteer search parties were organized by the community, scouring the wooded area and roads around the Harrisons' home. Mark, meanwhile, continued to join in the searches, feigning grief and despair. He appeared on television, urging anyone with information about Lisa to contact the police. Everyone believed that he was really the heartbroken father, doing everything in his power to find his daughter. The incident gradually became a big topic of discussion in the community. The newspapers reported Lisa's disappearance every day, and many people began to fear that their small town was becoming a place of mysterious kidnappings. Families in the area became more vigilant, limiting the time for their children to go out at night. There were even rumors that Lisa's kidnapper might be a stranger from elsewhere, making the atmosphere in the town increasingly tense. Mark, meanwhile, continued to maintain his cover. He attended prayer services for Lisa's safety, held church meetings to encourage the family and the community not to give up hope. Every time he appeared in public, he appeared sad and desperate. No one could suspect that he was the one who killed his daughter and was hiding a terrible secret. However, the tension inside Mark began to increase as time went on. Every time someone mentioned continuing to search for Lisa, he felt pressured and afraid of being discovered. Although he remained calm on the outside, Mark lived in fear of being exposed. He knew that if anyone found out the truth, everything would collapse quickly. Time passed, and despite the relentless search, no trace of Lisa could be found. Despair began to spread in the community, and gradually people began to accept that Lisa might have been kidnapped and that there was no hope of survival. The prayers continued, and Mark was still the leader, begging for forgiveness and mercy from God. But inside, fear grew. Every day was an internal struggle for Mark. He knew that the truth could be exposed at any moment, and that he could not continue to deceive the community forever. But instead of confessing to his crime, Mark continued to live under a false pretense, hoping that his fabricated story would remain undiscovered. After weeks of no sign of Lisa's disappearance, the investigation slowly came to a standstill. Despite extensive searches involving local police and community volunteers, there were no clues as to where Lisa might have disappeared to. Lisa's family, friends, and acquaintances were distraught and worried, but it seemed that every door was closed. Meanwhile, Mark Harrison continued to play the role of a grieving father, constantly appealing for help from the community and praying for his daughter's safe return. However, while the case initially drew sympathy from the public, FBI investigators began to notice some irregularities in Mark's testimony. Experienced investigators had seen similar cases many times before, and they knew that when time passed without any trace of the victim, something was usually wrong. Gradually, suspicion focused on Mark himself, whom no one had previously considered to be involved in his daughter's disappearance. The first thing that aroused the investigators' suspicions was Mark's unusual calmness and steadiness. Although he presented himself as a grieving father, in interviews Mark did not seem to exhibit the usual psychological symptoms of someone who had lost a child. There were no obvious emotions such as panic, anxiety, or despair states that are often seen in parents in similar situations. The lack of truthfulness in his answers to questions began to make the FBI suspect that Mark might be hiding something. Investigators also began to look more closely at Harrison's family life. Through interviews with Lisa's friends and acquaintances, police discovered that her relationship with her father was not as good as Mark had always portrayed. Several of Lisa's close friends reported that she had talked about the stress and harsh control Mark had over her life. Although Lisa never explicitly mentioned the abuse, her insinuations were enough to prompt the police to ask more questions about the relationship between father and son. These clues led the FBI to question Mark more thoroughly. During tense interviews, investigators tried to force Mark to contradict or reveal discrepancies in his story. They asked him detailed questions, asking him to recount everything that happened the night Lisa disappeared. Each time Mark recounted, there were small changes in details, inconsistencies in timing and actions. Although he tried to stay calm under pressure from the investigators, Mark began to falter. Not only stopping its statements, the FBI decided to apply scientific measures to find the truth. One of the tools they used was the behavioral anomaly detector, which helps detect abnormal psychological signs through physical reactions. During the interrogation with the machine, Mark showed many signs of stress and anxiety when asked about the details related to Lisa's disappearance, especially questions about the relationship between father and daughter and his activities on the night Lisa disappeared. Evidence from the interrogations and the anomaly detector began to push the investigation in a new direction. Investigators clearly sensed that Mark was hiding something. They decided to reopen the investigation around the Harrison family home, where they had previously searched without success. This time, with the help of more modern search technology, including seismic probes and specialized tools to detect signs of disturbed soil, they conducted a more comprehensive search. Finally, after hours of intense searching in the woods near the Harrison home, an area of disturbed soil caught the police's attention. As they began to dig in the area, they discovered clear signs of someone deliberately burying something. Soon after Lisa's body was found, buried under a layer of dirt and leaves. Her body had begun to decompose, but the signs of violence on her body, especially the bruises and strangulation marks on her neck, made it clear that she had been murdered before being buried. This discovery immediately changed the direction of the investigation completely. Mark Harrison, the father who had been showing signs of grief and despair for the past few weeks, was quickly arrested by the police. When confronted with the incontrovertible evidence from the discovery of Lisa's body, Mark finally admitted to his crime. However, even in the moment of confession, Mark tried to justify his actions. He claimed that Lisa's death was not a deliberate act, but the result of a panic attack. According to Mark, on that fateful night, when Lisa threatened to denounce him, he lost control. He said that his fear of having his secret exposed, of losing his honor and status in the community, caused him to act in a panic. Mark claimed that he did not mean to kill Lisa, but only wanted to stop her. But when things got out of hand, he panicked and accidentally strangled her to death. However, Mark's excuses could not change the fact that he had killed his daughter and then deliberately hid her body to erase all traces. Evidence from the scene, conflicting statements, and the discovery of Lisa's body in the woods near their home clarified the full extent of Mark's crimes. His actions were not just a momentary outburst of indiscretion, but a calculated plan to cover up the truth and protect himself. Mark Harrison's arrest caused a great shock in the community. People could not believe that a respected pastor whom they trusted and admired could commit such a brutal crime against his own daughter. Everyone in the town was shocked and heartbroken by this terrible truth. Those who had been searching for Lisa, who had prayed for her safety, now felt betrayed when they discovered that the perpetrator was the father they had once trusted. Mark was taken into custody shortly after confessing to the crime. The case quickly moved to trial, and his confession, combined with the overwhelming evidence, ensured that he would receive a just punishment. But no matter how severe the sentence, nothing could erase the pain Lisa had endured, nor the loss the community faced in losing a young and promising girl like her. Mark Harrison's trial took place in early 2006. Mark's case was shocking not only because of the crime he committed against his own daughter, Lisa, but also because of the moral veneer he had built up over the years in the community. Mark was once considered a respected pastor, but now the truth about his true character has been exposed to the public. During the trial, prosecutors presented a series of irrefutable evidence, including Mark's confession and forensic traces from Lisa's body. Prosecutors insisted that Mark's actions were not the result of a momentary panic, but of a brutal plan to kill his daughter and cover up the crime. They rejected Mark's defense that he had acted in a fit of rage. Testimony from witnesses, including Lisa's friends and acquaintances, helped to solidify the picture of a tense and abusive relationship between father and daughter. This clarified Mark's motive for his brutality toward Lisa. Ultimately, Mark Harrison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial ended with a fitting punishment for his crimes, but nothing could replace the loss to his family and community. Thank you for being with me until the end of this video. If you like true crime videos, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the videos I post every day. Thanks to all of you dear ones.